You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General!
Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of the Bombad Generals. I am Matt and I'm here with Seth and a very special guest, Kyle Dornbos. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, how are you?
Not too bad. It's not common that we get can we say it now? I think we can. It is the number one ranked North America player in real life play here with us, and I think for the moment still number 2 in Invader League, but for my money, I'd say the best Legion player alive right now, talking with us on our dumb little show here. So thanks for making the trip.
That seems a little subjective.
I gotta hype you up so that I can feel like the underdog.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
Underdog by 1 point in North America.
Yeah, I think we interrupted, between Luke and myself, I think we interrupted your reign by not even 12 months, right? Because you had it through Adepticon last year.
Yep.
You regained it by December, technically speaking, so pretty impressive stuff there.
Yeah.
I think really it takes us... I was trying to make a list before the show of all your accolades, so let me know if I've missed any. I've got Invader League number 3 champion, Worlds runner-up for the one and only Worlds so far, and then Atlantic City Open 2021, Nova 2021, SoCal Open 2021, Nova 2022.
Nova was 19, the first one.
Oh, 2019, the first Nova. Oh, right. Was there a Nova 2021?
There
Probably
was not. No.
There was another Nova. This year's Nova, and then PAX 2022.
That's
missing
I
any?
think that sounds right. Is that 6? Should be 6.
Oh, this guy knows. Yeah. This guy knows. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 IRL tournaments, Worlds runner-up, and 1 Invader League.
Yeah, that sounds right.
There you go.
Kyle, do you have like a trophy case of all your awards?
It's just in a pile on my shelf.
Oh, there you go. That works.
Which one means the most to you, actually? Like, which one do you look back on and you feel the most proud of?
Probably the Atlantic City. That was that final when I played Luke. That was the first time that we had faced each other in like an in real life tournament since the Worlds final. So it was kind of like a revenge game for me. And it was one of those games where Luke was just like relatively soundly beating me for most of the game, and then Maul just kind of clutched it on some important saves and then basically killed an AAT by himself, and that ended up winning me the game. So it was one of those games that you're like losing right up until the last moment, and then suddenly you're not.
It feels like you earned it.
I don't know if I earned it, but
well, I mean, it feels more so than sometimes games just go, well for you, and you're like, oh, that was kind of anticlimactic because I didn't feel like I really earned it. But I mean, that's most of Legion, right? Putting yourself in a position to still potentially win, even when things are the odds are against you, right? It's just knowing, hey, this is what I have to do to win, so I'm gonna go do that and hope.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did. I hoped, and then Maul made the saves he needed to make. It was one of those things. He had like 1 or 2 wounds left and needed to make 3 saves, and he made all 3 of them, and then survived basically to do the thing that he needed to do at the end of the game. So.
I mean, confederacies are built on hope, as they say.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's close enough.
It reminds me of our talk where we said if you feel like you're losing the whole game, but you still have your force user, you definitely still have a chance to win.
Yeah, no, that was a wild game. So probably that one, I guess, if I had to pick one.
If you had to pick.
Yeah.
So I know, looking through that list, I mean, you've won big events with Empire, you've won big events with Rebels, with Droids. So I wouldn't really characterize you, at least I don't think of you as being a player with a main faction. But would you say you have a favored faction? And kind of what would draw you to that faction, if so?
The faction that I most enjoy playing is Republic. It's got all the shenanigans, basically. And all the synergies. I forget which like Magic the Gathering identity that is, but that's the one that I have the most fun playing. I think the one that is most effective for me, at least right now, is unquestionably Empire. And that's true even if you go back to like when I played them in 2019. So yeah, I would say that right now if I have a main faction, it's Empire, simply because it's most effective for me. My Discord icon is an Empire one, since you have to pick one. But my favorite one to play is Republic.
Is there any specific combos or shenanigans that you like about the Republic that just sticks out to you?
I know that this is not a popular opinion, but I actually enjoy playing Anakin.
I think it's just not a popular opinion between Seth and I. I think in the wider world, people think Anakin's pretty exciting.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like a template of a Force user in that his command cards don't really do anything except just make him a better Force user. Like, they're not splashy, but he's a fairly defensive, fairly flexible Force user, and I like what you can kind of build around him with Republic. So, yeah.
That surprises me, because I heard you say, like, oh, they've got the synergies, they've got the tricks, and I'm sitting here, I'm nodding my head, because, like, that's why I like Force users, and that's why I like certain lists, because of tricks and splashy. But Anakin isn't that, but okay.
Well,
interesting.
I guess he's
synergy, I guess.
Yeah, there's a difference between, like, he's like efficiency synergy, right? Mm-hmm. He's super durable, he's cheap, he hits things hard when you swing his lightsaber. And he gives your dudes a bunch of tokens that you can use. So he's not like splashy. What is that, spike? It's like his abilities don't, he's not going to be like Yoda and just do all kinds of crazy stuff that your opponent's not expecting. But like he's reliable. He's relatively easy to use. He's tough to kill because he gets a free dodge token almost every turn, and it kills at least one thing anytime you shoot at him or swing at him. And he's only 155 points. So, like I said, he's kind of like a template for a Force user. he's like the closest thing to a generic Force user you can get, I guess.
Now, I think this kind of dovetails into that discussion, because for me, Anakin is one of those Force users who is especially useful before he dives. Like, some Force users don't do a lot other than obviously zoning is very powerful, but because of the token sharing, Anakin can do a lot for your army while he's hanging back. So would you say, playstyle wise, that works for you because you're a more conservative player with the Force users, or just generally, how would you describe your playstyle and how you approach the game?
I think like 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said that I was a very conservative player. And I think that that's probably still my most natural place to be. But I've also played lists like SoCal Open was triple Wookiee, double airspeeder, which is the opposite of conservative. and then Blizzard Force with Vader is very similar too, right? Like Vader's a very aggressive, get in and start whacking things as quickly as possible kind of Force user. So and I think Blizzard Force, and I hope this is not because it's just like degenerately overpowered, but I think it's the most fun list that I've played as far as like specific lists, because it's kind of it's very fragile, but it also is extremely mobile and hits really hard. So it's kind of like the I do what I want list.
It's like Jedi the list.
Yeah,
right. Like Jedi are very powerful, but they're also very fun to play. Blizzard Force, very powerful, but very fun to play.
Yeah.
But also grossly overpowered.
Yeah.
And you're a degenerate.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So
says the guy who's been talking about playing Blizzard.
Hey, I don't want to. I just have to. I have to play Blizzard because I feel like I have zero chance to beat Kyle at LVO if I don't have Blizzard myself.
Well, and
that's the problem.
If it's not on their radar, then you're basically doing a public service, right?
Because I don't want to have the same situation for Worlds. Exactly. I want to play something else for Worlds.
Yeah, it's like Hunger Games. Like you put yourself forward as tribute, and taking one for the team, basically.
And if we want to make a Katniss and PETA pact and walk out there as co-champions, I won't say no.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably playing Blizzard Force for LVO. I don't really know. Like,
We'll find out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, unless something drastic happens, but they've given no indication that they're going to specifically adjust Blizzard Force in any way, and all of the new rules seem to benefit what was already a very good list. So
yeah, and all the top competition is kind of out of the game at this point. Not out of the game, but nerfed. Everything else got hit hard. Maul Pikes and Anakin Pikes specifically. So it's tough. I'll keep thinking about it. I want to find something else. Maybe I'm just too blind to see it, but
yeah, maybe something with like I think the medic cut on for Republic for the clones was interesting. I could see like Anakin with some medics, and you can make some pretty ridiculously durable Republic lists, but I don't know if it's like enough.
The courage hurts there, right?
Yeah.
It's very, because I will say I haven't played it a ton, just a game or two, but you've got durable, useful core, but they're coming in at 90-ish points still, and they're courage 1. If they came in exactly the same but courage 2, I think it's a whole nother ball game. You just lose the action efficiency too easily, I find.
Yeah, that's always been the struggle with phase 1s. Yeah, you're paying 75-ish plus points for something that's courage 1, and it's just, and Republic really does not have great suppression mitigation in general, you know.
Nope.
Their suppression mitigation is Inspire upgrades, basically. Like they don't have any access to Compel or Dauntless, or they don't have a lot of face-ups to leverage Strict. So yeah.
The next part, before we get too into list building, what would you say turn 0 cards, so deployment, objective, and condition, in any order, what would you say is your favorite card from each of those categories?
Probably Hemmed In for deployments, because that tends to, most tables are kind of designed, whether it's consciously or not, on like a diagonal to diagonal axis.
Yeah.
So Hemmed In tends to kind of get some really like different and interesting setups as far as where the units actually start relative to the terrain pieces. And of course you start really close to each other in Hemmed In. So it's I've never had like a boring game on Hemmed In.
Have you ever played VAPS on Hemmed In?
I have, yeah.
It's a wild time.
It's totally crazy. Yeah. Objectives, I know people hate on Bombing Run, but I enjoy it in one specific context, and that's when I have speeders.
So when you have Bombing Run in your deck, you mean?
Yeah. Well, or if your opponent also has speeders, it's also really fun.
Yeah.
When I played Snyder at SoCal, we both had speeder lists. I had the double T47s, and he had triple Staps, and we played Bombing Run, and it was crazy. So yeah, I'd say Bombing Run. I actually also enjoy VAPS. I know this is a controversial opinion, but I really like VAPS is one of those objectives where the status quo can get flipped extremely quickly and easily, because anytime a unit dies, right, that's what happens.
Yeah.
I think it's personally the swingiest of all the objectives. I know people think it's like static and boring, but I think that kind of undersells all the like positioning and stuff that goes into it. So
for me, I'd say VAPS is almost like the peak, like competitive, like traditionally competitive Legion objective, in a sense of like, I think a lot of Legion at that level is all about positioning and like working on small advantages, or at least used to be. It's maybe kind of changing a little bit, but like VAPS just takes that up to 11 because it's so punishing if I lost a unit or I put something in the wrong spot. And then condition.
What's that?
Condition.
What's your favorite
the condition.
Oh, favorite condition.
Yeah.
Probably supply drop.
Yeah.
You have like this.
I feel like that's the easy one.
Yeah, because you have like this little mini game that you're kind of playing with yourself to see like if you get stuff useful. There's a little, like, it's strategically interesting, but there's also just a little bit of randomness to it, So
shifting gears a little bit, Kyle, with the new, of course, these past month we had a ton of new rules come out. I'm sure you read them. What are, like, of course you play Blizzard Force, but other than Blizzard Force, what are some like lists or like combos or things that you're thinking about that, like, man, like this could be potentially really good, like with the new rules?
There's a couple things. Unfortunately, none of them are rebels or droids.
Yeah.
But so there's kind of two changes that really stand out to me as kind of disproportionately affecting certain lists, and that's the panic changes and then the vertical mobility stuff. So for the panic changes, clearly I think Blizzard is already well positioned for that because of Vader. But I am not a Yoda player, but I think that Yoda is really interesting in that context simply because you can dump 6 suppression on one unit at one time, which is going to be enough, if they only have a Courage 2 commander, which is most lists in the game, to completely like neutralize a unit from scoring. And in games that matter, one unit is often enough to like tip the scales. And then you look at objectives like Hostage or Recover, where you only have between 1 and 3 objectives that matter, basically. And with the way that the new panic rules appear to be written, you can, if a unit receives enough suppression after it activates, and it's then considered panicked, it will not drop that objective, but it will also not count for scoring. So if you've got Yoda and your opponent goes with a box carrier or the hostage before Yoda, you just go with Yoda and then you dump 6 suppression on them, and they're now holding a worthless objective that they can't give to anyone else.
Yes.
So that seems pretty good on those objectives. And clearly
jumping Yoda with the changes in verticality seems really good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on his 2-pip turn especially, where you're usually playing burst of speed, but not necessarily, like, he doesn't get jump on that turn. But now he kind of can. I mean, you wouldn't play burst because it's speed 1, it's climb at speed 1 anyway, but
well, unhindered though, it seems like things kind of all have unhindered, which means he could just, if there's a barricade in the way, boom, who cares now? So I mean, even that gets a bit of a buff, I would think.
For sure. Yeah, so I think Yoda benefits a lot from the vertical changes. Clearly Vader does. I think clones in general do, simply because one of the struggles, at least playing like an Anakin Padme list that I had, was if you had a awkwardly placed line of sight blocker, you kind of had to choose like a side to go around it. I actually ran into this in our Adepticon game. Where it had those like super awkward, long, skinny line of sight blockers right near the middle, and I had to like pick a side for one of them, and I ended up trying to kind of do both, and then my token sharing was all split up, and it was not great.
If you could just go over top of that, it's a very different game.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say this before like playing multiple games with it, but I actually think the vertical rules kind of flatten the table, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they essentially make all height 1 line of sight blockers just like woods. And in that context, clones are going to be pretty good because they don't have to break up their ball at all. They just kind of death ball directly towards something, and if they run into a line of sight blocker, they just roll over it. So I think it could, and clones tend to rely a lot on trooper units that don't have mobility keywords. So I think they're big winners from that vertical change, potentially. I think Empire as a whole, because it has a lot of long-ranged range units that don't have movement keywords. Death Troopers, Shore Troopers, Storm HRUs. So...
Empire is probably one of the factions with the least amount of jump in its list building, right?
Boba Cad, and that's it?
Yeah, there's no Empire units that are not mercenaries that have jump.
Or steady, really. They don't have much, you can't even move to the side and get a nice easy shot off going around the corner currently.
Yeah, I mean, it's snows, basically.
That's, I guess, good old snows.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Empire is... It's interesting because I think I was trying to put my finger on why the rules changes seem to be good for Empire generally. The easiest, most obvious one is simply that they're the suppression faction, right? So they have all the suppression gimmicks if you're making suppression more useful, that's going to be helpful to them. That one's easy, but like all the other stuff, they're kind of like, besides being the suppression faction, they're kind of just the vanilla dudes and bodies faction. That like they don't rely that much on synergies or gimmicks or anything. So anytime you have changes that specifically affect certain strategies, they're going to be mostly neutral to it.
No, I agree, because it's like if you're already nice and mobile, then the changes aren't really, like if you can already do that well, it's not going to help you very much. Versus now, hey, everyone can kind of do that, and now they get the big benefit that they were missing out on. And I will say, having played one game, I guess, with it now, 2 games, jumping Vader is nasty. So a unit who also likes suppression rules plus verticality rules, man oh man, Vader is nuts. And Force Choke, with the line of sight changes and the no more scoping, Force Choke is now basically the only way to pick up unit leaders or heavies before you would otherwise suffer wounds to lose them.
Yeah, and it's not like Vader was hurting for usefulness before any of these changes either. So.
Nope. One of the things I've been thinking about is that, especially looking towards LVO, is even though I don't think pure suppression lists are the way to go, like I don't think you want to build your whole thing around, oh, I'm going to now cram as many suppressive weapons in as I can.
Yep.
I do think there's going to be a lot more suppression out there, and it'll just inadvertently be something you have to consider and be ready for, because suppression, just normal suppression, is already pretty powerful and pretty annoying. Like, are you changing in light of that? Are you changing anything? I think for me, I'm mostly just like tossing in maybe a copy of Lead by Example when otherwise I would have had Vigilance.
Yeah.
But I guess... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's what you do. I mean, I think you're right in that I don't know that it's like a good idea to, any more or less than it would have been before, to like proactively build a suppression list. Because really the only thing that changed is the panic timing thing, which, you know, if you run up against like a Yoda list where your commander has Courage 4, that change isn't going to make your list any better than it was before.
Yeah.
It's still going to be good at reducing actions, but you know, it already did that. So to the extent that like you were already building a suppressive list, and that was a thing that worked for you and was good, you know, you should probably still keep doing that. But like, if that's not something you were already doing, I don't see a specific reason to do it, if that makes sense. But it's definitely something that you have to build to counter, because I think you're right, you're going to see more of it, and because it's sort of in like a silver bullet kind of way matters a lot in very specific situations. I think you have to, you know, if you want to win 6 games, you have to kind of proactively plan for those situations, because if you run into even one of those situations and you're not prepared for it, you're just cooked. So yeah, I think I'm either trying to play, there's really I think 3 possibilities here. You either just run a Courage 3 commander, which is probably the easiest thing you can do, unless you're Rebels.
If you're Empire,
yeah.
cough.
Right. If you're Empire, yeah.
Or clones.
Yeah. You know, if you're droids, I guess you got to run Dooku, because like droids' whole thing with suppression historically has, like, they don't have tools to actually remove suppression beyond the rally step, because you know they have droid trooper, right? So like their faction doesn't actually have any built-in tools to reduce the amount of suppression that you take or hold. So I think you just, you know, maybe you run Dooku if you're droids. I don't know. Maybe you throw some Lead by Example on there, but that feels like really strange, because you're not going to need it most of the time, and then there's going to be like one situation where you just lose the game if you don't have it. So yeah, I don't know what droids do other than run Dooku. For me, I think, you know, if you don't run a Courage 3 commander, you got to have probably like 2 copies of Lead by Example. If you're running a Courage 2 commander. Or the third possibility is essentially what I think you can do with lists like Blizzard Force, which is that you just plan for the game to not go to 6 turns, because one of you is going to be dead. Or your objectives, you know, also in the case of something like Blizzard Force, the objectives are ones that suppression thing is not going to be a huge factor. You know, it doesn't matter. The change doesn't matter at all for bombing run, because panicked units already dropped objectives, and there's no victory point value to holding on to a bomb at the end of the game. Breakthrough, it can potentially matter, but often on breakthrough, your scoring units are like too far away from each other to impact each other with suppression at the end of the game anyway. You know, you either toilet bowl or you like crash into each other earlier, and you know, you either make it to your opponent's zone with enough units or you don't. But generally speaking, I think on breakthrough, there's not going to be a lot of situations where, you know, your opponent can like suppress your snowtroopers, because hopefully they're just too far away from everything that matters.
And if they are suppressing your storm or snowtroopers, they probably aren't scoring with the unit that's doing all the suppressing.
Right.
Because they're probably not getting into your zones.
Right, exactly. So that should be like a wash. So that's bombing run, breakthrough. What else does Blizzard run? Payload. It's not super clear that the change actually affects payload. I think it's probably supposed to, but at least rules is written.
Because of where the text is in the payload card?
Right, because the way that the rule that they previewed is written basically says that they can't score objectives. But the way the payload card is written is simply that you count unit leaders and then you move the objectives, and the actual scoring is done by the payload itself, not by the units around the payload. So at least we're right.
Forums.
Yeah, right. I think right now it's pretty clear that payload is not affected. I think it's probably supposed to be affected. But even if that's the case, you have Vader with Master of Evil, and there's no better combination on payload than that. So
yeah, that's the thing at the end of the day, right? Blizzard, even if they're a little bit susceptible to the new suppression mechanics, they also are going to be like the number one perpetrators of those suppression mechanics, because they've got Vader with Master of Evil.
Yeah, and then what's the fourth one? Hostage. I mean, if my opponent wants to play hostage against Vader, that's fine.
Yep.
I'm all right with it. So, yeah, I think lists like Blizzard that are objective skews will be fine. I think if you take a Courage 3, you'll be fine. I think if you take a Courage 2, you got to take some lead by example. It's probably not going to matter most of the time. Like if you're just playing one-off games at your local, you might not even notice. But if you want to go 6-0 at a tournament, like, you know, you're going to go 5-1 if you don't have a plan for it.
Yep.
So.
We talked about Vader, Yoda, Anakin. I'm finding it really hard to leave home for a competitive tournament where you want to go 6-0. I'm finding it hard to leave home without Force Push.
Yeah.
Are you in the same boat? If you were to build a list without Force Push, where would you start? Or is it a complete non-starter for you these days?
No, it's definitely not a non-starter. I mean, I brought a list without Force Push to Nova Open, and it was fine. I think if you don't have Force Push, you definitely need like a specific built-in counter. Like you shouldn't just play a random gun line that doesn't have any melee units or Boba Fett in it. But I think if you take either version of Boba with the whipcord, that's like a nice soft counter. You still need sort of a more complete plan for dealing with the Force user. But that's a good place to start. We haven't exactly seen like the full, you know, we don't know what the aptly named Myrtleizer or the Cricket Bat for the Death Troopers do. Not Death Troopers, Dark Troopers. But their base melee profile is kind of crazy, and they get to attack twice a turn. So I think it's possible that if you run like a Dark Trooper list, you might not need it because of, you know, you just run up in a tight ball, and if their Force user gets close enough to your Dark Troopers, you just start slapping them twice a turn with a Cricket Bat.
Yeah, like screened with the Dark Troopers so they can't really get to your soft underbelly without going through them, sort of deal.
Yeah, or like sacrifice a Storm unit or something, you know, and then get in there with the Dark Troopers and start thwacking them with that Cricket Bat. Yeah, I think that could be fine. It's hard to know without seeing what that profile looks like. And then I think, I mean, who knows how good a mass Wookiee list is going to be in relative terms now that everybody is kind of doing the Wookiee thing, but
Wookiees could get worse with scale. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we don't know what the new scale does, but like I think if you're running kind of a mass melee list like that, you probably don't need it either. You know, when I ran the double airspeeder triple Wookiee thing at SoCal Open, like that handled Force users just fine because they can't hide from the airspeeders, and if they wanted to hit anything relevant, they were in melee with Wookiees. So,
Yep.
I definitely think you can run a list without Force Push. But you definitely need a specific plan for why you're not doing that.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's two-pronged. I feel more and more like it's getting harder to counter Force users because of either burst of speed, making it easier for them to engage where they want to, or just the overwhelming firepower that is Blizzard Force. But we talked a lot about defending against Force Push, but man, oh man, or Force users in your lines. But for me, I miss having the offensive potential of Force Push as well, especially when it comes to objectives. So I don't know, it's tough for me. It's tough. But yes, I feel like I agree with you, Boba. Boba's probably where it's at. Melee skews, they scare me. They scare me still with the dice creep.
Yeah, and they scare me a lot more than they used to with the mobility rules. I mean, besides just the fact that most melee skews have a lot of units with those mobility keywords in them, if the board is essentially getting flatter, which is what's happening with the vertical changes, then that's going to impact melee units defensively too, because range units are going to be able to get more shots on them by just kind of cresting over line of sight blockers.
Yeah.
For anyone that has played those TTS maps with the big sloped hills on them, think of like every map like that basically, and those maps really advantage range units a lot because they can just kind of go straight over those line of sight blockers and deny cover and then shoot something on the other side. So that's, more maps are going to play more like those, and I think those are bad for melee units. So I'm with you. As far as the offensive potential of Force Push, I think if you're running a list, like with Ide and Boba, the reliable chip damage and even in some cases the burst damage at range on a list like that is so incredibly high that I didn't miss Force Push from an offensive perspective in that list. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so you heard it from Kyle, guys. Don't bother running Force users at LVO.
Yeah, don't do it.
Just leave them at home. You don't need them. Definitely, we don't want to see them on the other side.
Yeah.
Kyle, I don't want to take up too much of your time here tonight. Before we head out, any soapboxes you want to get on, or anything you want to plug for us?
No soapboxes. I guess I can plug. I'm not usually on other podcasts, so I'm not used to plugging my own, but I, of course, do have a podcast, The Notorious Scoundrels, which you can find on basically all the places that you find podcasts, and also on our website, thefifthtrooper.com. We also have a blog, which I'm the editor for, with roughly 2 articles a week that come out, so go check those out. We have a stable of writers, if you will, that pump those out, so go check that out. Yeah, that's basically where you can find the content that I'm involved in.
Yeah, I can't imagine a lot of people listening who have found this don't already know about Fifth Trooper, but like you're selling it short. You've got links to list builders. You guys work with Legion HQ.
That's true.
You've got the ELO rankings.
Yep.
Legion Quick Guide is a fantastic resource. I'm interested to see how that does or doesn't change come the new core rulebook, but it's a great one-stop shop after, of course, subscribing and downloading all of the Bombad Generals podcasts.
For sure, yes.
Obviously, yeah.
Yes, and even their new game uplink, like for your tournaments.
Oh, yeah,
like,
game uplink. Yeah.
I don't think you're going to go to a Legion tournament without using game uplink now.
Yeah, I think that will likely be the default going forward for Legion, so...
Well, Kyle, thanks so much for joining us. And everyone watching, I hope you have a great rest of your evening or day or whatever time you're listening. So thanks so much for watching the Bombad Generals. And stay Gungan.
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.